Our next presenter is Ian Maxted from HMRC. Ian's been a long-term... Can if you want, I mean...
Well, it's up to them really, isn't it?
Different strokes for different folks.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Ian's been a long-term user of IDEA at his time with HMRC and has presented for us a couple of times. Always been interesting presentations and well received. Today Ian will be talking about national minimum wage. So I'll hand over to Ian. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning everyone. You all right? Jolly good. I've done a presentation before on the basics of national minimum wage, but this is looking at a specific aspect in a specific case. The idea of it is to try and show you that just one little element of a minimum wage case can be interesting, which is the word I like. And now let's have a look. How are we going? How do we drive this thing then? Oh, there we go. I've worked it out. That's something. Right, two main areas of my work. The first one is something called ESS, electronic sales suppression. We won't dwell too much on that because most of that is about looking at data that's contained within EPOS devices. Now these things that you go to a shop and beep, 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 and they store all the data and we have a look at it afterwards. Well, part of HMRC's job is to look at it, take it apart and see what's missing. And invariably there always is stuff missing, surprisingly. It is interesting and challenging, but most of the manipulation is done prior to us getting the data and prior to us using it in IDEA. So for me, it's not a brilliant one for using as a demo, hence going to the second subject, minimum wage. Now minimum wage is one of the most interesting areas that I've ever worked on using IDEA, because it is so challenging, and I hope just to show you a little bit of that today, hopefully. But the main part about it is the collaborating part. We heard from the previous speaker about making your clients understand. Well, we have the same problem because we have to make caseworkers understand, the people we work for within HMRC, and making, in minimum wage case, the employers understand what we've been up to, and to explain it all, hence all the audit functions behind IDEA, and that helps us. Okay, so it is all about collaborating, and the main collaboration is with the employer and with the workers themselves. So minimum wage, there are rates set every year and everyone has to have those rates, and there are all sorts of little fiddle factors around it, and this is one of the fiddle factors, what we're going to go on and have a look at. Okay, right, there we go there. Oh, I'll go that way, that's better. Okay, minimum wage, a simple example, required uniforms. So what we've got here is we've got an employer and they specify in a contract that you must wear a specific type of trousers and shoes, but they don't provide those trousers and shoes, so you have to provide them. So the minimum wage rules, you can see up there, if the people are required to wear specific uniforms, the employer has to, doesn't have to provide them, but if they provide them, there's not a minimum wage implication. If they don't provide them, there is a minimum wage implication, because we're saying that worker is out of pocket because they have to buy black trousers, black shoes. They've just come out of college, they don't even know what black shoes and black trousers look like because they've been in jeans. Yeah, so that's the sort of thing that we've got to try and get over. Now, there is law above that. There is a whole ream of minimum wage law, but I didn't want to quote it because, like most law, it's a bit interesting at best. That's the interpretation of it, which I think is a better quote of what it's all about. So we've got this example here. We've got the employer. You've got to provide your own trousers and shoes for working there. We have a payroll, which is both monthly and weekly. Very common. A lot of people go on weekly work, weekly pay, and then once they've been there for a while, then move over to salaried I use that term advisedly because salary has a completely different meaning in minimum wage. People might think if you're monthly paid, you're automatically salary. Not for national minimum wage, you're not. That's another little feature that we won't get onto yet. We'll leave that one in abeyance. And the wage rates, I probably all know, they are all age dependent. So depending on how old you are, depends on what minimum wage or living wage, if you're over 25, that you get or that you're entitled to. Okay, so they're the basic rules around it. Now, talking about collaboration, so what's happened here is that the caseworker has talked to the employer and the workers. So we're trying to get a rounded view of what's going on. Sometimes there are agents involved, and the whole point of it is to come up with a set answer. Now, this is a set answer, which I probably need to explain. Down the end there, that's what they agreed in terms of hours. So your hours worked, if you're over 30, you might be deemed full-time. Then the first time you're walking through the door, you're allowed what I call the initial allowance. So that's your, I've just got to come in, I've started today, I've bought the trousers, I'm here, that's my value. And you can see there are different rates for depending how many hours somebody works. This is often agreed because people say, employers say, well, if you're only turning up for 10 hours a week, why should I pay for a set of trousers when that'll last them a year? You have all these sort of arguments. I leave all that to the caseworker. They've then got to tell me what the result is. This is the result. So they agree this, first time you're walking through the door, you get a value. Now that value is just a value, it's something that's agreed. You might look at it and say, well, I can't buy a pair of shoes, or I can't buy, well, you might not be able to, but it's a value that's agreed between everyone. Okay, there's a lot of collaboration type work in this. This 6-month allowance. So what helpfully the caseworker has agreed is that every 6 months you'll get a top up. You've gone through your trousers within 6 months, you need another pair. Your shoes, they're running out, we'll get you another pair of shoes as well. The values are less, and again, this is all agreed by hours, by type of worker. Okay? Everyone with me so far? Good. I'm not. With me. Right, so review period. We're looking at 3 years. Normally the law does specify 3 years. Normally we start with a sample period, but then we'll go back and the law specifies 3 years. So that's what we use. You've then, as the previous speaker said, understanding your data, you've got to understand it, because the first part is what is the important key. You might think that something like NINO is a lovely key, your national insurance number, that's brilliant. It is until you have a temporary NINO. And then you change and then someone miskeys the NINO. Okay, and then you're back to square one again. So you have got to work out what the proper key is, or combination of fields to get a proper key is within that data. So that's echoing the, you've got to know your data. That regardless of whatever you're doing, you've got to know your data. You can't get away from that. So here we have a couple of staff members. The staff ID happens to be unique in this case. If only that was the real world. When people come, go, they'll get prefixes, they'll get suffixes, they'll get a brand new number. All sorts of things happen. But for us, we've got to identify an individual and keep it at individual level. So let's just say, for the sake of this, our staff number is unique. You can see here I've got something called PRP, Pay Reference Period. That's your payroll. So for this one, the first one is on a monthly payroll for January. And you can see that's the month of January. It's a calendar month. There's none of these funny 445s or anything else going on. It's a pure calendar month. Okay? We can see here we've got hours. Now, for the sake of this, I'm calling it basic hours. There are all sorts of descriptions on payroll systems for hours for work. Hundreds of them, and that's part of the collaboration as well, and working out what each one of those means, and importantly, does it have a minimum wage implication? So I've gone, forget about that, we're just doing with basic hours, age, oh that's the age of the period, isn't it? So that's the age, that's just, I haven't added the +1. People might say, well why haven't you added the +1? I don't bother. If I'm doing an age between the start and end date, I just leave it less 1, because you see 30, it should be 31. Because later on, it'll have a knock-on implication where you'd have to put the 1 back in. So if you don't worry about it in the first place, you don't have to worry about it in the second place. I'm just very lazy when I'm using idea, I'm afraid. I try and keep it logical. You can see our second worker here, interestingly numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is all made up stuff. Is on weekly pay. So this value here, the age value, is just showing 6 all the time. Yes, it should be 7, but I'm just taking it for the sake of this, it's 6. Okay. So we have these people, we have all these hours that they've worked, we have the difference here, and then I'm looking at this and going, right, okay, I'm going to use and I'm going to calculate a daily hours. Why am I calculating the daily hours? Well, my original, if I go back up here, these hours quoted by the caseworker were for a week, but I've got monthly payroll. So I've gone to the common denominator, which is a day. Regardless if it's monthly or weekly, I've gone down to a day. That's why I did it that way round. And here we've got some benchmark points. Now this has to be agreed by all parties. At the end of the day, for national minimum wage, you have to issue a thing called a notice. And the notice has to be accurate, hence the use of IDEA. We churn all through this payroll data, time data, all sorts of other systems to get accurate information. This has to be agreed because this isn't 100% accurate. This is a benchmarking, a guesstimate. So what I'm saying is that if you work over 30 hours for 6 days, remember I haven't taken the 7 because I've gone for the 6, it's 5 hours a day. If you work over 5 hours a day, you're full-time according to this benchmark. Now you can argue that's crap, or that's not crap. This is what's been agreed for the case. Okay? All of this stuff we have to, right at the very start of the case, we have to agree with the caseworker and with everyone else, and it's all recorded within the records as well. So we're not just making this stuff up and going with it. I wish we were, but we're not. So you can see then the 15 hours, which was the next one, 2.5 hours a day, and then all I've done is that's just a straightforward compound if. So looking at my V daily hours, I just put a V in front of everything for virtual. So when I'm adding virtual fields, I call it a V, so I just recognise, I know it's a different colour, we like colours, but I just do that because it just helps when you're looking at the audit file afterwards. You can see it's something you've added in. Okay, so you can see here, if it's over 5, it's an F. If it's greater than or equal to 2.5, it's a R. Now R I've just called reduced time. Doesn't matter what it is. I don't care what the description is as long as I've identified what it is. And P I've called that part-timers. So compound if, the default one is any other scenario, take a P. So I don't have to put less than, I can just use that. Happy? Okay, I'm sorry, I keep pointing to that one. I should walk over here, shouldn't I? I'll point at this one. Okay, so straightforward summarisation by staff number, looking at that field that I added, the V daily hours. Here you can see that when I do a summary, it gives me the 2 workers, it shows me the average hours, and then I put the indicator, in this case it's an R or an F, alongside that field. So I've now marked those as either a reduced hours worker or a full-time worker. I've then tacked that back onto the main file. Shouldn't say tack, should I? I should say join. But my description. Tack it back onto the end here, so now I know what that worker is. And yes, there will be ups and downs in the payroll, they will work more in one week, but it's an average. And this again is part of the agreeing what's going on. Now, the next bit. This is saying that we've got our average hours, we've got the reduced and the full-time rate. So now I need to work out, I've got to start thinking about this 6-month thing that's got to keep churning every single time, 6 months. So we've got a little count macro, and what it does is it just looks at a unique key. So for this instance, it's staff number. And what it will do is once the file is sorted by date order, date being your PRP date, so pay reference periods, i.e. your salary or your weekly pay weeks, it then just adds a simple counter to it. See that? So we start at number 1 for the first staff number. When we hit the second staff number, we get number 1 again. Okay? Yes. Excellent. Right. This is where it starts getting interesting. Here's 1-1. What do I mean? Let's go up. So here I've got 2 instances. I've got the first hit for this one and I've got the first hit for this one. Remember, it's a 3-year pay period. Were they already here prior to the 3 years? I.e., should they have that number 1? Because if they were there the previous month, then no, it's tallied on. Yes, it's only counted within that review period. Which you might say, well, that isn't right because they've been here for 3 years before. Well, for this case, it's only within the review period. Sometimes you do have to go back. It depends on what the agreement is. Okay. So one would indicate the first PRP in the data set and hence give rise to an initial. Remember, the initial was higher than the 6-monthly top-up. Well, it may be true, but supposing if they were there already. So then you're into get a staff list at the start of the review period. Are they there? So for this one, you'd have to add an existing indicator, yay or nay. Do they exist? Don't they exist? If it's no, they don't exist before, then 1 does equal 1. Spot on. If it's a yes, i.e. they were here before, then 1 doesn't equal 1. 1 is just 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. But for that instance, it may well be that it's the first 6-month deduction that kicks in then. Again, it's down to the local agreement with the caseworker and the employer. So is 1-1. So then we've got following indicators that we've added, which would be the work hours. So remember, that was your full, your reduced or your part-time hours. Yeah? Then the existing indicator, were they already there prior to that review period? And you've also got the PRPs bearing a pure 1, where 1 does equal 1. So then we've got the month. We can determine the month. because of the at age. Remember the numbers, the difference numbers, so we've either got 6 for a weekly or a 29, 30 or whatever for the monthly ones. So then this combination of the month, the pay reference period and account. So then what you need to do there is to start building up keys and equations that look for all of those instances. Now you can either do that as a one-off shot and get an equation that's 63 miles long, or you can do it in set bits, where you can get a little bit through, you get an equation, so you might get full-time, no. So that's one element that you can deal with and test that to get a yay or nay at the end of that. But then you're looking at account. The reason the account stops there is because I'm only looking at a 3-year period. So all I'm doing is saying, well, through that period of time, if it's a first in payment, then they get more. If not, they'll get the rolling payment going through. Okay? So these in conjunction, remember then as well, you've got to put it in conjunction with the appropriate rate. So how do you get that? Well, you get the age of the individual. So where I had the field VH, that's the age of the pay reference period, the difference in time. But you now need the date of birth of the individual and then work out the actual age to then work out the actual NMW or NLW rate. So there's a whole bit that's mishing and mashing between all these two. I haven't gone through all the equations, perhaps I should have done, but I haven't. But that is a straightforward thing on uniform. Straightforward. And yeah, I've got half a dozen indicators which mean one way or the other. Which is why the use of idea is brilliant, because then you can build it up in little sections and work the logic out for each section. So are they an existing worker? Yes. Are they over 25? Yes. So that could be a 1. So if I see a 1, I know I'm on living wage rate. But I'm on the 6th monthly cycle because I haven't got the initial bit. So that's just what you've got to work to. And then that was me. So that was very quick, short, sharp and sweet. I didn't go into all the equations, perhaps I should have done, but it's just to try and give you an idea. Because as well as uniform, there are things like accommodation, which follows exactly the same sort of rules. There are standard deductions, so where you've got your payroll deduction for a court order, so where you're paying a regular amount and there's a charge for that, you then have to pick that up. So it's invariably in a case you'll find there's a dozen different areas that you've got to address to get to the right and result at the end to stick on a notice. And idea just really helps going through it. Okay. Any questions on it or? Happy? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.